So something is submitted, it may take a week to get into Brightspace.
I wanted also.
Shimbale, what team are you on?
I believe for this upcoming week or last week, the one that
No,
I'm
this upcoming week. So what we're going to have, you all have been assigned teams, and those team numbers are what you're going to have for the rest of the semester. And we've got some team things, but what team are you on?
So I was hold on.
Is in team 3.
Was on I
In
think
team 3?
4.
Okay, so you're going to be in team 3.
Yeah.
I'll come answer your question there. Tejas, what is when you say engineering undergrad?
Yeah, in the EYM stuff, it says like engineering undergrad as a category. And would that be part of the EYM 4?
Is that one of is there another presentation?
Yeah, it's, it's like aerospace, mechanical. One of them was like, I can check it right now. It was something to do with engineering undergrad.
So what we talked about is 3 of them have to be the disciplines, right? The EYM.
Mm-hmm.
1 has to be from each group, A, B, and C.
There's one called Engineering Undergraduate Research Office.
Oh, okay. That's different that's why I wasn't thinking engineering undergrad. That's like all of you. Yeah, the research, there's a global engineering, undergraduate research, the entrepreneurship certificate. That can be the 4th activity.
Okay.
If that's something that you find interesting, that you want to go and you want to write that up, that 4th activity can be anything that you can write a reflection on how that impacted your thinking of your major. Okay?
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I wanted to ask everyone if you could please add your team number just before your name here in Slack. So if you scroll over to your name, you should see a more button that allows you to rename yourself.
It's kind of funny. So my ideas learning community, all the students come in with numbers and I'm like, oh, this is the team that you're on. Oh, Teja, I was like, I've seen motion behind you. It's your roommate. Yeah, I got it. Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I'll tell you what, when you get into your breakout rooms are going to be your team numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can't find your team, when you get into your team, so we're going to talk for about 20 some minutes about Python and those things, and then we're going to put you in your breakout rooms, and you can wait to do that. Let me repeat with the EYM. If you go to an activity and you can justify why this activity helped you in your career or major choice, that is an appropriate activity. The SAE car, solar car, IEEE meeting, NSBE meeting, SWE meeting, those are the kinds of things you should be doing. Kinds of things you should be doing anyway to help you figure out kind of what you want to do and also to get involved. All right. Did it feel like Labor Day weekend? Yesterday I kept forgetting it was Labor Day. We actually had meeting. We met with a cool partner. It's working on environmental justice in Philadelphia. And he runs a nonprofit. He's an engineer and executive director of a nonprofit working in the inner city in Philadelphia. He's one of our EPICS partners. And we're like, yeah, well, it's Labor Day. But anyway, any exciting things happen on Labor Day weekend for people?
I pulled an all-nighter working on an essay.
Hey, awesome. I pulled an all-nighter fixing things I screwed up on Brightspace for somebody else's division. Not
Oh,
funny.
great fun.
2 in the morning, I hit the wrong button. It copied all this stuff. There wasn't a stop button. I want to meet the developers of Brightspace. If it was mine, I just would have lived with it, but it wasn't mine. So we like copy things from our divisions over. Yeah. So it took me like, anyway, you all don't care. Let's get to
Well, Professor, I have a question.
today. Yes.
If someone signs up to go to one of the EGO events and then they have an unexpected family emergency and then they experience a 5-point loss, is there anything they can do about that?
So, okay, so let me be clear. If you have a family emergency, personal emergency that calls you away, that is an excusable event or activity thing. So we're not going to dock you for, but what we ask you if you miss something like that, give us some type of documentation. Seems a little harsh, but I've had a student that had the same relative die multiple times during their career, which is a little awkward. Actually, when I was at Procter & Gamble, they had somebody they suspected was like lying about that. And it was an awkward way they found out. That person got fired, but I just kind of document it. We don't need to necessarily know details, but if there's like an emergency, if you all get sick so that you cannot get online, let us know. The answer, I think, to that too is the EYM is set up that you can register for 4. So we would just have to make sure that that 4th activity is probably not another EYM, because I don't think the system will let them in again. Does that answer your question, Hector?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and if someone doesn't know their team number and they want to add it to their name, you can just send me a private message on here too, and
Yeah.
I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah. Or yeah. When you get into your breakouts will be, okay, so let me, whoops. So I've got things on different screens. I forget how, come here, zoom up, share. All right, so we're going to get into Python, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about how you use some of the functions and to turn you loose doing the things. Before we get into Python though, does this slide look familiar? It should. It's the exact same slide. Oh, with the exception that I put dash slide from last week. So we talked about, right, we got the pre-class quizzes. I know that we had, like 138,962 questions this week. There won't normally be this many, but by the way, pre-class quizzes, just remember, you can drop 4 over the semester. And so if you get into one like, I've learned enough and want to get back, you can manage those. But if you remember the homework, so what we're going to do is we're going to get into the homework. Stuff we're doing this week is due next week. Oh, look, there's a TYK or test your knowledge or conceptual quiz every week. When we put together the class, we tried to think what would help you all as students in this when you got online and you got asynchronous. And what we thought was if we put things in so everything's the same every week, we would lock stuff in. And we did this, right? And then next week we'll get something else. And every week there's going to be a test your knowledge quiz. And if I look at what this week is going to be, we've got Excel 3 that's due. There's Python 1. There's also the teaming module that we have. Now, one note, next week, when we have you're going to have the Python assignment, there's 2 different drop boxes. There's one for the teaming, and a teaming is a code of cooperation and a team poster. Because we didn't know your teams, we could not set up Gradescope as a team assignment yet. So we released it and we didn't know your teams yet. So that's an individual assignment. Every student needs to submit their code of cooperation next week and their team poster. It's going to be the same thing. Everybody submits their own copy if you want credit. That's just not set up as a team assignment yet. Does that make sense? So you've got your Python and you've got your team assignment. Now with the Python assignments, you're going to have PDFs. And what you're going to do is you're going to save Python programs. And you're going to start today saving Python programs. Python programs end with the extension .py. And in the assignment, it will list the files that you upload. So you're going to, it's not like Excel where we got to figure out how to print a thing in Python. You upload the Python files and then any PDF answer sheet. Does that make sense? Now, I felt a little bad that we didn't show this. We did show this slide or a similar one on Tuesday, but there's some people that missed the test your knowledge. So I thought maybe I didn't make it fancy enough. So this week I added a little flashing. And maybe if that's not enough, I want it to be a little bit more explicit. Does anybody have any questions? What's due this week? Now, we did have people that missed, and we have an instructors meeting on Monday, and we're actually talking about this over email. And we said, what do we do with the people that missed the first test your knowledge? Because we dropped one, and now some people have already missed 2. So they've already missed things in the class just because they missed the deadline. And we try to strike a balance. You all are at college, and so we've got expectations, but we do want to be fair. A conversation I had on Monday morning with some of my online students that are in different parts of the world, and I know some of you are online, they just talked about how hard it's been adjusting with the different time zones and things. So that made me a little sympathetic, but we have to hold you accountable. And what we can't do is we can't make, changes. So I can't do like Tejas, we were chatting, hey, he seems like a good guy. I'll let him retake the test your knowledge. But Chibale, not so much. No, you can't. That wouldn't be fair, right? We have 400 students that are in this class, most of which took the test on time. So we need to figure out a way to be fair. And we talked about it. And so we have a one-time deal. What we did is I created a extra test your knowledge quiz, and we already had them numbered. So this one becomes 2.5. Oh, wait a minute. What did I have? Hold it. Ow! Sorry. Let me go back to this slide. Now I see the test your knowledge. The pre-class quiz was over module Excel 3. So this was actually Excel 2. I didn't understand this in the other 2 classes. The pre-class quizzes on module Excel 3, that was the last pre-class quiz you took. But this ends up being a pre-class quiz Excel number 2, wasn't it? So it's the one that you did over histogram. Does that make sense? The conceptual quiz is over the modules that are in the homework that you did for Excel 1 and 2, and the pre-class quizzes that was over histograms. Okay, not the homework, just the pre-class quiz questions. So those quiz questions. Did that answer that question? All right, let me go back. Test your knowledge 2.5. We already numbered them. So this is an extra one. It is, you would find it under professional preparation, under student success. There's a PowerPoint deck and there's a video presentation that describes those. There's a quiz there that covers the presentation and some basic knowledge. Like one of the questions is, who is responsible for you meeting your deadlines? And it's a multiple choice thing. And you can choose between President Daniels, me, your parents, or yourself. A hint, that would be yourself, right? You're in college, we're adults. Does that make sense? This is, it's up online. It's gonna close at 11:30 a.m. on Friday. Why? Because, good question. Every quiz closes on Friday. Now, what we did is we increased the number of TYKs that are dropped. So this is not required. So essentially, we added a quiz and we increased what would drop. So if you do not take it, it just ends up being dropped, no harm. But if you want to take it, if you've already taken the first Test Your Knowledge quiz, you can take this one and you'll still have 2 more Test Your Knowledge drops for the rest of the semester. So it's your choice. Does that make sense? We figured that was fair. So the question is this required? It's not required, but it's an option for everybody, because anything that we do has to be open to everybody. Okay.
So Professor, if we take this, we get 2 more drops out of any of the other, like we get 2
any
drops.
of the other Test Your Knowledge, just that category. Yeah, the Test Your Knowledge and the conceptual quizzes. Thank you for clarifying, Leo. Yeah, you'll still have 2 drops. It's straight math. We count 6, and we had 7 scheduled. 2.5 makes 8. We will take the top 6.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, so it's a way to do that. It's valid information. The presentation is one that I've done for years and years. It actually is the my 11 suggestions for you to do well in school. And I pulled out the presentation because one of them is to create a schedule, and I had some extra fun with that one. Okay, so that's what we're doing. With that, what we're going to do is we're going to get into flow charting and the computing. And before I get into flow charting, just some things. As we get into this computing, couple notes. One, this class has more of an emphasis on computing. There are some people that say, well, you know, the first engineering class shouldn't just be focused on computing. Remember that you're taking this class with epics. And you got to remember that the experience is what you're doing in epics is part of the first year. But what we have to do is we have to look at what are the learning outcomes that students would go through in engineering 131, 132, and the computing is a part of that. When we're learning computing tools, it's not just teaching you rote memorization on how to use a specific language, but we're trying to teach you how to handle a computing environment. What that means is you're going to have to learn how to handle some frustration and some confusion. So when I ask the computer to do something, if I don't type it exactly right, it gets angry at me and starts throwing error messages at me. Now, if you're like me, it gets me upset. I take personal offense. I get angry back at it. I might even scream at the computer or do some other non-socially acceptable things. But usually I'm doing it in the privacy of my room, occasionally in office hours, and that's extra embarrassing. But then what we do is we take a breath and go, okay, and we logic out what the computer's telling us to do. what resources can we use and how do we go solve the problem? Computing is a lot of problem solving and logical processes. And that's the big thing that we're trying to teach. We want you to help each other, but we want you and us as a teaching team to help enough. So we want you to develop the skills so when we're not there, you've got the skills so that you can handle that frustration, you can sort the things out, you can logic the problem out, and you can be successful. So we're going to allow you to be frustrated to a certain level. Our responsibility and our desire is not for you to get overwhelmed. So if you're getting too frustrated, you just got to communicate with us. Don't expect us to give you rote memorization and to dictate code. But we just need you to be able to communicate if you're getting really frustrated and stuff like that. Does that make sense? And we want to be fair and we want to focus on the big things. So the reason we did that extra test your knowledge quiz is we want to be fair and we want to focus on some of the bigger things. So some students were struggling with the different times and things like that. We want to be fair, we want to be consistent, hold you accountable. We think we came up with a reasonable piece, and we will do our best to be fair through the entire semester. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be easy. Now, do not, please, run from engineering because of your frustration in here. I will repeat, if anybody's thinking of leaving engineering, please reach out and I'd love to have a conversation. I have had I promise not to twist your arm to stay. There's some students I've met with when they said, here's my interest. It's like engineering's not the thing. But engineering, it's just really, really pretty cool. And I think it's a way to really make the world a better place in a lot of ways. Now, flowcharts we're going to get into, and there's a agreed upon method to do flowchart, and that's so we can develop a shared language to communicate. It lets us communicate how we want to create a process, sequential. If we want to make decisions, we're going to talk about that next week, and maybe even when we have to repeat loops. There are a lot of things that we can use flowcharts for. So all of you are in the EPICS learning community. And as part of that, you got placed on an EPICS team. Now, I will tell you that the way that we use to place you on those EPICS teams was brand new this year, and it was a total failure. It's direct to the program, that's on me. And we spent a lot of time trying to sort that out. And we've had some meetings with people across campus that don't want the problems we had to ever repeat. And one of the things I did when we went to those meetings is I created a flow chart of the process that we use to select to get you into your courses, all the way through from when you say, hey, I want to be in a learning community to end your first day. And I used the same processes on a spreadsheet. It was really effective. We weren't putting this in code, but it allowed everybody to see and communicate. So the idea in the flowcharts are beyond computing. In computing, it allows us to look at our logic. I got to tell you, one of the big pet peeves that I have, one of the things that has made me audibly scream in office hours is when I'm talking to students, and my office hours are Wednesday, so it's the day before things are due. So very often students are just finishing up their assignments and they say, we got the programs done. The only thing I have to finish is the, wait for it, flowchart. Flowcharts are a tool that you should use before you write code because it allows you to lay out your logic. We do not care if they're formatted beautifully. We don't care if they're handwritten, if they're done on the computer. You do not get extra points for putting them in some 3D CAD with flashy, I don't know what. Actually, 3D CAD would be way overkill, so strike that. But anyway, if they're handwritten or computer drawn, you're going to get the same points. We want you to develop the mindset to use a flowchart to logic things out. The first programs you do, honestly, you probably don't need a flow chart, but we're going to ask you to do some. Why? Because we want you to develop the discipline of doing those. When you get to our Python project in 3 weeks, which has me a little stressed, you're going to need to do some flow charting to organize that and to organize each other. You're going to do a team project. So we want you to have the skills to be able to do that beforehand. Now, flow charts are used in a lot of things. As I said, I used them when we went and talked to the registrar. This is a immigration map when you're looking at things to say selection that we start here, and there are different paths with decisions. There's some loops that you can get into, you know, whether you got, yeah, I was going to say the immigration process, there are probably a lot of loops that you get into, but there are decisions, there's loops. People use flowcharts. This is from mechanical engineering. This actually shows all the courses in mechanical engineering from different types, and it shows the connections here, show the prerequisites for things. So if I had like an internship in semester 6, I could figure out how to shift classes around. Now we've agreed on certain symbols. We're not going to nitpick, but these symbols are recognized across all kinds of computing environments and programmers. That a parallelogram is my input-output. The rectangle is a process, something I do. The circle ends up being the start or stop, and a diamond is a decision or a question. And all these things are connected with arrows. So if I look at an example of a linear thing, this is just a very simple example, but it shows that I start with a flow chart. This is the thing, would I need a flow chart to figure out how to do this? Probably not, probably do this in my head, but I want to develop the discipline to do it when I'm going to need it later. So if I look here, it starts in English. It just says, you know, it describes the different things that I need to do. I get an N1 and N2. Then what I can do is I can come in here and I can start to say, you know, what are these going to be? I'm going to define N1, N2. I'm going to sum these. Now notice here, this isn't Python syntax yet. So I'm not worrying about what the syntax is going to be yet. I'm just looking at the flow and looking at what this is going to be. I might even use this to calculate a number. Doing a hand calculation to verify your programs is always great. The most dangerous type of error in a program is one that lets your program run. The computer does not identify any errors, but it gives you the wrong answer. As an engineer, you should be terrified that your program's going to do that and want to make sure that you can test it. So doing a hand calculation, like is shown here, is an excellent way to do that. So I can do a test case. Now, if I look at something a little bit more complex, and this one has decisions, and we're going to get into the Python programming that lets us make decisions next week. The modules are online, so if you want to get in, I replaced one of the recordings. So if you miss my voice in between classes, you can get on the if structure one. But this is, I go in and I buy something. So I didn't buy much because I'm going to buy it for $1 and I'm going to get change back. So it's got to be something really, really small, but the math is easier with $1. So if I go to the checkout and then I'm going to pay and receive change. So this is my input output. And after I pay and receive change, I want to look to see if I have the correct change. And if I do, then there's going to be some type of action. So I'm going to leave the store. So these ovals are at the start and end. No problem. I go in, I buy my thing, I get the right change, I leave the store. But what if it's false? What if I get the wrong change? What would the action be? What would the action be? by the way, this is kind of the interactive part. So if you want to put stuff in the chat, it shows me that you're still there because I can only see nobody's here. Everybody left. Now I'm sad. Demand change. Well, one of the things, okay, you got converse with the cash person, ask for more change. Well, this is just, I didn't have the correct change. It could be too much or too little, right? So I actually have a decision here. I got to say, hey, did I receive too much change or not enough? Now, if I received too much change, what would I do? Oh, who said run away? Oh, it went up too fast. No, what I'd probably do is I would recognize that, while it's not the store owner that's going to eat it, generally they dock the cashier who probably makes much less than an engineer. So I'm going to give the change back because I care about people and the cashier. And I was trained well. And if I received too little change, what I would do is I would ask for more change, ask for the correct change. Now, somebody said, you can say, yeah, thank you, and you can keep the tip for that. Now, what I can do is, if I look here, there's actions here. When I'm leaving, maybe if I get the change, maybe I'll be polite and say thanks. Actually, say thanks probably should go under any of those. Although if I give them back the change, they should probably be thanking me. So I would say you're welcome. But this is just a fairly simple example, but you see you've got these different cases and allows me to track through. It doesn't take very much for a program to get pretty complicated. And that's why drawing some type of diagram, it is going to be good. Okay. Excellent. All right. The adventure begins in Python. So what we've got is when we come over to Python, we've got the window here. Most of your work today should be over in this part of the window. This is where we write programs. And the reason I say that is it's going to have you just type very simple things, but it's going to ask you to save them as a .py file. So what I do is I come up to File, and I could save those, and then I've saved all the work. So if I'm doing it over there, you've got the console window down here. This is where I interact with Python. So if it needs an input, I can put it here. If I ask it to print something, it's going to show up. And then this window at the top is where my variables, or if I click files, I can see what files are there. Now, Python's kind of a cool programming language, and I gotta confess, I hate computers. I'm not sure if I said it yet today. And I'm not a fan of computing. I've learned Python more recently. And Python is designed to be lean. I'm going to say lean and mean, but it's designed to be efficient. And when I think about that, it's used in a lot of big data and computing, where if I'm doing millions of calculations, or that the speed actually matters. The things we're going to do in this class, the speed of the computing really doesn't matter, but Python is designed and it has a lot of things so it can be efficient. Now, as a result of that, it doesn't have all the functionality that you might want. And so if we want something, we have to import modules. And what they've got, for example, with the math, Python doesn't know like what a sine or cosine is normally, because that's additional overhead. And when it's running, if it's not doing trig calculations, it doesn't want to carry that overhead. So when I think about it, I think of like I'm running a race, and all this extra stuff with the math and the other stuff is like things I have to put in my backpack. I can run much faster when I'm in my running shoes and a workout shirt versus when I put my backpack on and we're going camping. Can't really run there, that we just walk. So I think about that Python's designed for efficiency. So all we do is we say, I want to import this module, and this module then is connected to Python. And the way that we connect this then is we say we want to import the math module, and after that I can do math dot, And I've got access to all the functions. And the math dot just tells MATLAB, or tells Python, sorry, that I connected with that math module. Go to the math module, and I want to use this function. We've got a lot of other modules. An awesome part of Python is that you've got developers literally around the world that are writing modules for things that they think are helpful. And you've got the ability to link to all kinds of things. So you could go out in a purple and yellow module or the green module or whatever that you're going to do, is we can connect those. And we'll connect with different tools. But we're just giving you the tip of the iceberg of what you can do over with Python. In Python, they talked about data types in the videos. They talked about none, that's just like an empty, a way to like initialize things. I like to think about it. I was going to say, we won't do a lot over with that. We're going to do a lot with different numeric data types and integer. Real numbers are called floats. Complex numbers have a real part and a complex. Just note that Python uses a J as the complex number. We also have strings. Strings can be words, letters. You can also have numbers classified as string. So if numbers are brought in with other text, they may be classified as strings. And a feature of Python is if something doesn't have to be a specific way, they don't make it a specific way. So there are a whole lot of languages that have like single quotes and double quotes, and Python says whatever. And so I can make a string variable that has single quotes. I can make a string variable that has double quotes. Now, take note that with any variable I make, they're case sensitive. So this example over here, capital S underscore TR, is a different variable than small s TR. Boolean is true or false. Now, in Python, true, capital TRUE, actually has a value of 1. So you can actually add true to something and you would get 1. And false. So it functions as different ways. Remember that these are capital T, capital F. So if it's all caps or all small letters, that it doesn't recognize that as the value of 1. There were sequences with lists. Lists use the square brackets. If you notice here, I'm using variable names that have an underscore. Any idea why I keep using this underscore? Do you think Professor Oakes just has a thing like that's his favorite character? Or is there a reason that I keep using those? The next one actually has that too. So this is like the mix list, L underscore mix. Very good, Thomas. That's one reason. Spaces are icky. Yep, can't use spaces. There's another reason that I use underscores too. This list here, I'll keep watching the chat as I do this, has a mix. So this A and the word are strings. This 2 is an integer, and the approximation of pi is okay, Rajan, that's good. It is a float or real number over here. Now, in a list, each of these has a place in here, right? This is the first place in a list, the second place, the third, the fourth. The first place in the list has what number? This was in the videos. What number is the first place? 0. Good job, Katie, Rajan. Okay, so if I want the 2, if I want to identify the 2 as something, I could go the list, lmix, that's the variable name, square bracket 1, that's 0 place, 1 place. I want variable 1 to equal that, and that's the equivalent of saying that the variable 1 is equal to 2. Now, one of the reasons that I use, and you see I'm just kind of fat, like out of habit, I use the underscores. I mentioned before that the most dangerous kind of error in a program is the program runs and gives you the wrong number. One of the ways you can potentially introduce error is if you use a variable name that's the same thing as a Python function, or Python has a name and it's going to use it somewhere. Python never uses a name with an underscore. So anytime I use an underscore, I know it's unique. Python didn't use it. I'm not going to inadvertently rename a function and change a calculation. So it's one of the things that I think it is a good practice. If I get to range, another sequence is a range. Now, if I do a range of 5, what are the values of X? What is X going to represent? This was in the videos. What's it going to represent? Range of 5. So it takes a little bit for people to like wake up, and then they've got a good job, Brendan. Okay, so this is going to give me 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a range, and it's going to give me 5 numbers starting at 0. Starting at 0, the 5 numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4. We agree that that's 5? Now, the weird thing with range is I can also give it a starting point and an ending point, but this really isn't an ending point because it never gets to the end. Now, when I learned Python, I thought, oh, okay, I want to scream. As a professor, I get excited because this allows me to write really tricky test questions. And when they're easy, tricky test questions, I get happy. But as a programmer, I'm like, how do I remember that? Well, what I realized is these two things are asking for the same thing. So a range of 5 says I want 5 numbers, or I want to go up to 5. But that first one only went from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I say start this and give me a range to 5, in order for this to be the same, I don't include that. Now, if that kind of makes sense to you, that's great. Otherwise, just remember in range, it never includes that final value. I can also do a range where I go give it a starting value. Now, this is a starting value of 1. My ending value is 5, and I go by 2. And the ending value I don't get to. So what would this give me? What would X be with this last one? Very good. It's going to be 1, 3. The next one in the sequence would be 5, but that would make my end, and that would violate over there. I don't know if that's why we got it, but it kind of makes sense to me. Range will become very important when we get to loops. Tuple is a list that you can't change, and you use parentheses. Now, isn't that weird? Like, why would I make a list that I can't change? Well, sometimes in the computing world, and it's beyond the scope of this class, that you want to do things where speed is so critical. So if I can create a structure that doesn't change, it has less overhead, it's more efficient, and it can go faster. It's the same thing with set, and set gets into hash stuff that I don't understand when I don't know. Being a mechanical engineer, I'm just thankful that there are people that understand that, but there's some more advanced pieces. So Python has a lot of features that we can use as beginning programmers, and it has a lot of features for very complex. Dictionary was the other thing that they talked about where you could have a key in those. I mentioned Python names. Python names for files and variables, they're case sensitive. They always have to begin with a letter, uppercase or lowercase. They can contain numbers, but they can't start with numbers. They cannot have spaces, so they can have an underscore. So that's why when I do things like if you have Python1 underscore your username, it's a common mistake is somebody will put a space in and they'll look on their Windows Explorer, or even if they have a Mac and Windows will let you put spaces in file names, so it will exist on your computer, but Python won't find it. Drives us nuts for those. You can't use special characters. Now, isn't this kind of weird? you can use an underscore, but not a dash. So what do you think the Python programmers had against a dash?
Oh, subtraction.
Oh, yeah. A dash is a minus sign. So it's a mathematical operator. So you said you can't have, it would read it as your first word minus your second word. As far as I know, Python names can be any length. I've not had a student find a length limit. If you're bored and want to go for that, that you can. If you wonder what words are reserved, you can import keywords and do a keyword list. It would show you those. If you import keywords and do is keyword and put the word in, it'll give you true or false. And there are other words over in that. I get confused trying to memorize these. These are words never, ever, ever, ever used for a variable name or a file name, because it can introduce all kinds of errors. But if you put an underscore in, then you're good. I want to show you Python, show you office hours. As we get into the Python, the rules are same as when we did Excel. You have team tasks you can work together. If you want to have somebody driving the computer, pulling their screen up and typing and work on it together, you can do it that way. A word of caution, if I'm working with Hector, Hector's a lot smarter than me. He's going to have the one on the computer. I'm watching. That's great. When I got to do my final project, I'm going to need to be watching Hector do my final project for me because I didn't know. So what a better thing to do is to say, all right, for task 1, Hector, you're going to drive the computer. Task 2, I'll show screen and I'll do that one. Or if Hector's driving the computer, I'm actually trying to just to make sure that I can do the things myself too. Okay, but for the team task, if you turn in the exact same program, as long as your names are on there, you're fine. But for the individual tasks, you've got to do that on your own with consultation from other people. Is there any questions over that? Oh, Chelsea, yeah, that was kind of a challenge on the longest name. Let me show you Python and then we'll see if there are any. Remind me, Hector, I want to show office hours. Let me come over here. Okay, so we've got, I gotta move you all out of that. We've got the console or the programming environment over here. We've got a little template. We'll be providing you with a template for next week. If you put people's names, you can put comment statements in. If you put I was going to say hashtag or a number sign, and I type anything in there, these become comment statements. Actually, I should put them there in that green section. If I do here, the comment statements are here. They get grayed out. These are for the humans to read, but I could always put names of collaborators there. So I just did a simple thing. I said, good morning, class. If I come up to the top here and I run this, ooh, it's still morning. Oh, wait. Good. Let me correct that. Here we go. Good afternoon, class. So it runs over here. If I go over to the console window, you know, as I said, I can import math. Oops, not important. Import math. Now, I'm a lazy person. Well, actually, I'm not a lazy person. I just don't like to do things that I don't have to do. So if I can do something easier, I like to do that. So rather than type math, I'm going to write this as M. Okay, so now I've imported math. I went out and I said, I want to go get that math module. And now I've got access to things like the sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say x equals 2. And I want to say y is equal to I want the sign. So what I could do is math.sign. But what I've done is I've made this easier. When I said import math is M, now it's just M dot sign. So I don't have to, whoops, I don't have to type the ATH. This is a bigger deal for modules that have longer names, but then I can do the sign of X, and that gives me a Y value. So now the Y value, if I just type Y, it shows me what the Y value is. So what units does this tell me that Python deals in? Does it degrees or radians as a default? Yep. So it gives us radians over there. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you is if I go to any of these windows, there are three horizontal lines over here, and there's options. If I click on that, there's one that says I can undock this. So I can move this window around. I can make it bigger. I can make it smaller. Whoa. Here we go. I can make it bigger. I can move it around. I like stuff. I have freedom. Or if I pull it up sometimes, I'm like, whoa, now it's the whole thing. Now I can make it smaller, but if I want to put it back, I like go home, I click those same lines. I come over here and the last thing it says dock and it puts it back. So I can restore that feature over there. Okay, what we want you to do is we want to get you on we want to get you on the Python here. Let me where? Inbox. Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. Homepage. Let me go over to our bright space. And if I go, oh, let me go back to home. Let me look over here at the calendar. Look at that, September 11. Ooh, there are 2 quizzes due that day. Wow, I can get like an extra head start. Why did that show up twice? Oh, great. I did something wrong. This shows up twice. And I'll fix that when you all go in. You ever have one of those days? Hey, technology. Okay, let me come back to content. And I go to office hours. We last night got permission that these office hours on Tuesday evening and the ones that I'm going to do on Wednesday evening are going to be in Shreve. They're going to be in the basement. We will post the room number, but they're actually going to be in person. So if you want to see, I'd love to see some of you, or I'd love to see any of you that are on campus if you want to come by. The other hours, except for these 2, will be online. And I apologize, but the honors was still figuring out their schedule and they own the room, so they have first priority. So we're going to be publishing those. So on Tuesday, Hector would have office hours and they end, and then Professor Zoltowski and the peer teachers will be in Shreve. And on Wednesday, what'll happen is CG, one of the other TAs, and Wes will have online hours, and the online hours will overlap the in-person hours a little bit, that they'll just stay on when you get there. Okay? All right. And I'll figure that out. Stop sharing. Any questions before we let you loose?
I got a question.
Is that the in-person hours are starting this week? So Wednesday, I'll be over in Shreve.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Okay. What's the difference between list range and range in Python?
Sorry, you faded out a little bit. Hector, could you hear her? Can you try
What is the
again?
difference between list range and range in Python? Okay. What is the difference between list range and range in Python? Like
Oh,
when do you know
the
when to use any of them?
list range
Yeah,
and
and range.
range. So if
Okay.
you combine, so what you can do is you can make a list. You can use the range function to create a list in sequence. So if I list range, the range only gives you a range. If you do a list, Shabala has it in the chat. If you do a list and use parentheses range, you use the range function, use range to create the numbers, but then list turns it into a list.
Okay.
So it's a way, instead of like typing, like I want numbers from 0 to 100, I can put list parentheses range of 100, and it'll give me 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 100. I don't have to type them in. So it's a way to create numbers. Okay,
Thank you.
good question.
Yeah.
All right, I think we are ready for the teams. So when you get to the teams, introduce yourselves, exchange contact information. You're going to need to meet outside to do your team poster and your code of cooperation. And then make sure everybody has the Python, and then get started on the Python. Thursday, very short intro, hit a couple highlights, and then you're going to have most of the time to work on the Python stuff. Okay? Anything else, Hector, that we forgot?
Nope, you covered everything.
All right, awesome. See you in your breakout room.
Hey, Cameron, are you there?